Hi, everyone. Welcome to Novelty Show episode 5. Today we're talking about agents and querying. I am Alexa Dunn, so you are on my channel. I am a traditionally published author. My debut was Brightly Burning. My next book is The Stars We Steal, comes out in 2020. And I will allow my lovely co-host to introduce themselves and their channels, and then we're going to dive into this massive topic. Huge.
Oh, yeah. Hi, I'm Kat from the channel Katie Tastic, where I occasionally post videos about writing and books.
And my name is Lainey, and my channel name is Ginger Reads Lainey, and I post videos about books and writing.
Awesome. So I'm just going to do a brief introduction of kind of what this topic is and why we're talking about it. Then we're going to be breaking things up into two parts. One part on agents and like all the things about agents, and then one part on querying and all the things about querying. And we have a ton of questions. Like, you guys came through with submitting questions, so we'll try to get to as many questions as possible. And of course, you can also ask questions in the live chat. It's a little harder to keep up with, so the best way to get a question answered is to use our hashtag on Twitter, which is hashtag Novelty Show. So, agents and querying. We're talking about this because all three of us want to be traditionally published or are traditionally published, and agents are the essential way to be traditionally published because you can't even submit your book, like have your book looked at by most major publishers unless you have a literary agent. So a literary agent is the middleman essentially between authors and publishers. They do earn commission for doing their job. They earn 15% on standard domestic book sales. We can talk more about kind of subrights and other percentages, though how deep do we really want to go in this one? And you get an agent by querying them. Queries are essentially a pitch for your book, and we're going to go into detail about how to write a query, our best tips for writing them, and we're going to talk a lot about our own experiences with querying and agents. And there are also a lot of kind of misconceptions and frequently asked questions, and we're going to try to cover as many of those as possible. So, Kat and Lainey, I would love to start with you guys talking about your querying experiences. How many books have you queried, and kind of what querying was like for you?
Oh,
anyone can go.
Live this trauma.
Trauma.
Oh boy. So I have really queried 2 books. For a third book, I sent out like 2 queries just to kind of test the water, and I ended up scrapping that because it was a middle grade novel, and I was like, I don't want this to be my debut. I have something else in the works. Like, I'm starting to thinking strategy about like my publishing career rather than just like get this book published. But the 2 I did query, the first was my first novel that I didn't really revise, and I definitely queried way too soon. And by the time I started getting rejections, like those started rolling in, I was working on something else, and I knew that I had done it too soon. And I was like, okay, this was a learning experience. I'm moving on. But the second time I queried, I had actually revised that, and my critique partners I actually had critique partners that time and got feedback. And they thought that it was gonna sell, like it was gonna get me an agent. They were very encouraging, and I really believed it was gonna get me an agent. I was like, this is it, this is where it happens. And I got close, but it didn't actually happen. And then I haven't queried since, and this was like 7 years ago. So I'm still a little bit scarred from that. And also I kind of took a step back from pursuing traditional publishing for a while because I wanted to focus on like learning my craft and actually getting good before I put myself out there again. Like, I wanted to be really, really sure the next time I queried that it could work out nicely for me.
Yeah, I kind of have a similar story. So I first started querying, I actually did it in 2016 with my first book that I ever completed as well. And I think that was definitely way too soon. It probably needed a lot more work. Despite having interest, it just wasn't where it should have been for representation. And then the second book, I think I queried definitely way too soon. But I thought it was good, but it wasn't. And I entered a pitch contest, which got a lot of likes. And then when I got rejections from all of those queries, I pretty much knew, one, my query was not good, and which we can talk about. later in the live show, and then it just wasn't ready. It needed way more structural changes, and I ended up rewriting the whole thing this year. So 2018 was the first year I did not query at all, but I hopefully spent that time. 2019 is hopefully the year that good things will happen.
Awesome. There's so much to talk about. I can't get ahead of myself and jump right into querying. I just want to talk about it right now. Briefly, kind of my story. I'm a weird unicorn. I did query my first novel too soon as well. I actually entered a contest too soon, which led to emergency revision. I was fortunate. I did get an agent on my first book, though there's stuff there. Long story short, she did find me in the contest. I also did traditional querying. That book didn't sell. I parted ways with that agent after the first book, so I had to query my second book. I failed miserably. We can talk more about that later. It didn't do well in querying, and we're definitely going to talk about how when you know a book isn't working in queries, like how do you know, A, when it's ready, and B, when something's wrong. And then I obviously had to write and query my third book, and that is the book that I got my agent on, and it was my most successful querying experience. And we can also definitely talk about, or I'm happy to talk about, when you feel that it's different, because when you have the book that is the one, in my experience, querying is a different experience when it is working. Like the responses come faster, they're more enthusiastic, and you usually can tell when this is the one. So that's me. So before we get ahead of ourselves, even though I want to, let's talk a bit about agents and finding agents. How do we even find agents, and what we look for in agents and fit? So let's start with, how do we find agents to query? Like, what are some of your favorite resources or tips or tricks for people? This was probably the number one most asked question that people asked for this live chat.
So for me, I think the best resource that I've used both times I've tried querying was querytracker.net or whatever.
.net.
I think it's .net. And I got the yearly subscription. It's only $25, which is a good investment for what you're trying to do. You get access to all kinds of stats from agents, whether it be like their response times or who they offer representation to. It also relies a lot on the community to give those stats, but that's the most comprehensive list I've ever found for agencies. And going from there, you can go to like their manuscript wish list, their interviews. But I think that is a good base, a base resource to start with.
Yeah, Query Tracker is a good one. That's what I used back in the day. Another thing that I really enjoy doing is authors who I really love or who I think my work is kind of similar to them. Just look in the acknowledgments of their book or on their website and see who their agent is, and add that as a possibility on your list. Like, you don't want to be querying like an exact comp title agent maybe whose like books are very similar, because they already represent something like that. But if you have like a similar writing style and like kind of genre feel to your book, that another book that you love, you can query that agent. Like, that's a good way to go about it. Yeah, I also think a lot of people tend to look at agents of like, this is like the end goal kind of thing. And they also just want an agent to sell their book. Like, I just need an agent to sell my book. And I think it's better to look at it as you're looking for a business partner. Like, if your agent is negotiating a contract for you, like, and you're on that contract, that's a pretty legit thing. Like, you're really connected to that person. And a bad agent can do so much harm to your career overall. So yeah, I think that we definitely need to talk about like how an agent is right for you and finding a good fit. Like, necessarily the most popular agents on like Twitter and stuff who you see and might be like your dream agents in your head, once you start talking to them, they might not like get your writing style, get your storytelling style. It might not be a good mesh in a partnership way.
Well, and also, so Twitter is another great way to find agents to query. And you kind of get there circuitously. Sometimes it's following an author you love and you see who their agent is, so you follow their agent. You can look at pitch contests, see who is favoriting things, who the agents are who are participating. Just following contests in general. Sometimes this is off Twitter, but I would always go through the roster of what agents were doing. Back in the day, it was Pitch Madness before Pitch Wars, but also Pitch Wars. You could see who's participating. But Kat, you mentioned Twitter and people on Twitter and dream agents. This is where we get into the caution of just because someone is big on Twitter or they seem legit, like they're participating in a pitch contest, doesn't mean they are. So as much as it's like, these are places to find agents, ways to find names of agents, you also have to vet agents. So another one I'll throw in, really good resource is Manuscript Wishlist. So this was something started a few years ago. It started on Twitter. You can literally look at the hashtag MSWL to see what agents want. Some editors also use it, and so do some scammers. Everything's so hard for querying writers. I feel like here's a resource.
Yeah, there's so much to discuss.
Yeah.
I want to mention another quick resource that I remembered, because we're talking a little bit about like how anyone can be an agent. You don't need a degree. You don't need any kind of certification. Anyone can call themselves an agent and start accepting queries. There's this website called Predators and Editors where people can kind of talk about their experiences with agents and editors and say if they did anything shady, kind of like a rate my professor thing, except it's like a rate my agent or my editor kind of thing. So you can like use that to vet agents, but you definitely need to do some vetting and research.
I also recommend looking at the Absolute Right forums. There's a lot of discussion there about scam agents and scam publishers. I find generally those sorts of tools are best for identifying flat out scammers. We can talk a bit about, like, there's a whole subcategory of schmagents, which stands for shady agent, that I consider just mediocre agents. And that's, oh gosh, there's so much for us to talk about. This is overwhelming. But exactly. So you want to vet and look for the outright bad ones, but we can also talk about kind of identifying middle of the road. We'll talk about kind of top agents versus new agents, and thinking not just about fit, because you have to think about fit, but also what you want from your agent. Oh, there's a lot. Another thing I'll just throw in quickly, and then we'll move into that very topic, what we look for in agents and fit. You can also look at conferences, either literally attending them, but just look at which agents are attending the top writers' conferences. So you don't have to pay $600 to attend, just see who the agents are who are doing live pitch sessions. Most often, not always, those are legit agents and good ones to look at. And so, yeah, you can cross-check all of these agents very often on Publishers Marketplace. So many agents have profiles on Publishers Marketplace that you can look at for free. So it's going to be an overview of their clients, their recent sales, and some of them will have information on how to query them. And then if you want to take it to the next level, you can also subscribe to Publishers Marketplace. It is not cheap. I believe it's over $200 a year. I do pay for a subscription. And so my recommendation is actually to find a friend who is paying for Publishers Marketplace, because you can look up the sales of any agent. And one of the best ways to figure out if someone is actually decent and can sell something is to see what they've sold. So that's kind of like a 201 level how to find agents or to vet agents rec that I like to give. Or just, yeah, find someone who has a subscription, because it is expensive. And I didn't subscribe till I had a book deal. So I didn't use it when I was querying.
And it also really depends on what level of research you want to do. Like every author should do a bare minimum of research on agents, make sure it's the right genre, and they represent similar books and they have sales and stuff. But I know that like the three of us are very interested in industry, so we kind of go that extra level, you know, like the Publishers Marketplace subscription, like we're a lot more into it than you necessarily need to be.
Yeah, and researching the agents just to see what they like and to see if that aligns with your manuscript. Because I feel like 90% of the advice I see is like you want to personalize the query letter, which we can get into later. But having that, I always write down like, well, when I was ever researching for querying, I wrote down like everything about the agent that I thought would mesh with me, so that when it did come time to write a query letter to them, I had something that like, oh, you like so-and-so, my book has X or whatever. So I don't know, but researching is like a huge part of querying.
Yeah.
And
Well,
yeah.
let's talk about what we looked for in agents or are looking for in an agent. How do we decide like what is notable when you're researching agents? How do we keep track? I use Query Tracker. So when you sign up for Query Tracker, whether you pay or not, you can basically you add an agent to like you bookmark them essentially to a list for your book. And so you can like go to the master page and you see all the agents you might query for your book. And then if you do query them, you change the status and you can track who you have queried. So I would add them there. I mostly did my tracking there, but I also know many authors do hella spreadsheets. Do either of you track it that way? And what metrics are you tracking? So what do we look for in an agent?
Well, I never had an extra spreadsheet or anything. Like when I queried, I just used Query Tracker because it was already like an established database and system, and it was easy to use like that. But in general, I spent a lot of time, like I would get my initial names from like books, comp titles of like authors I like and who I feel like my books would be kind of along the same lines. And I started at those agents, and then you can search for agents on Query Tracker by like what genre they represent. That was a big one where I started with a big list and I would narrow it down more and more by like going to like each and every single one of their websites and like looking at their profiles on their websites or Publishers Marketplace, what like more specific things they're looking for. And the problem is that not all agents are as forthcoming with this information as others. Like some agents have like zero online presence, but they're great agents because publishing is an old school industry and a lot of them are older and not really online. So like some newer, younger agents might have like whole websites where they get into details about like what's on their wish list, but they might not have many sales or they might not be at the most reputable agency. And then, you know, you could have agents who are at top agencies and who sell like crazy, but you can't find them online.
And you know nothing about them. You're just like, you rep so-and-so, so maybe you'll like this?
Yeah.
Well, so personally, what I was looking for changed between my kind of querying journeys. So the first time I queried, and like this did remain pretty steady, looking at genre, I think is really important. Genre and category. The number one thing is you need to make sure the agent actually represents what you write. Because I think some writers don't realize this because I'll see them. Well, and also we just hear from agents who say, I get queried all the time for stuff I don't represent. Agenting and the publishing is all a networking and relationship-based business. The whole point of having an agent is that they have the relationships and the knowledge that you need to get your book where it needs to go. So there's no point in signing with an agent whose primary relationships, for example, let's say you write YA, because we all do. If their primary relationships are in nonfiction or adult romance, and they have no relationships in YA, they might not be able to sell your YA book. I mean, they probably can't, to be honest, because editors in the business prioritize agents that they know personally usually. Like they have lunch with them, they like their taste, and they know that that agent knows their taste. And so they're going to prioritize submissions that come from agents that they have relationships with. So genre is really important.
They also trust that agent's submissions. You know, if you're Joe Schmo agent who just decided to become an agent and you're submitting book editors you've never spoken to personally, that's like barely one step up from an unsolicited submission to them. Like you're not going to get that much attention. They might not even look at it in some cases if they have so many other submissions from agents they have established connections with.
Exactly. And I think this is what shocks a lot of writers where they think, I just need an agent. No, you need a good agent.
You need the right agent. Don't just sign with the first agent who will take you. I mean, unless it does happen to be an amazing connection and like they
and even then, I have so many feelings about dream agent.
You really got to consider it's a big business decision. And I know so many newer writers who will like get in with the first agent who acknowledges them really because they want to be published so bad. And I understand.
It's like marrying your first boyfriend.
Yeah.
Which sometimes is great.
And sometimes
but
works.
Sometimes it's not. So genre and category. And I will say a caveat here. If you write YA, but you want to write adult eventually, don't necessarily count out YA agents who don't represent adult. Because you can get an agent later who does represent adult and have more than one agent. Also, many agents will state that they rep XYZ, but once they rep you, they'll rep anything you write, even if it's not their area of expertise. But also, I caution writers to query for the book they have right now, the thing they want to sell right now, instead of 5 years down the line. I think people get really too wrapped up in like long-term career planning, which is important, that they don't focus on the next 2 years. Yeah. And 5 years from now doesn't matter if you can't sell a book now. So that's a caution that I do make when you're looking at genres and categories that people rep. And so looking at sales is essentially, or agencies that people are with, is trying to guess that they have good relationships when you look that stuff up. So I prioritized sales in my genre of similar books and agency. I would research the agency if I didn't know much about the agent, especially if the agent was new. What other like essential things did you guys look, or do you guys look for?
I also looked at the agency thing, especially when you can't find anything really about the agent. If it comes from a reputable agency, it was like, well, that's probably going to be a reputable agent. Not all the time, but most of the time, I feel like. So I think it's almost querying for me, at least because I've been doing it now for 2 years. I feel like I know so much more about the industry just because I've been learning about it for the past 2 years. And it's just something you got to throw yourself into and then just consume everything you can about it. Pretty much from the agencies, who's representing who, especially in your genre. Like, I feel like I know a lot of what YA writers are being represented by who. Just because like I want to know as much as I can about the industry I'm trying to break into.
And kind of a 2-1 suggestion to add to this, when you are looking at agents and who they represent, it doesn't mean don't query that agent, but I do think it can be telling what kind of books they rep. And for example, if they seem to primarily rep and sell beautiful literary writing, and that's not what you write, still query them, but you might get a rejection because you're just not a fit for them voice-wise. So you can kind of see trends in their clients and you get a sense of their taste the more clients and sales they have. And something I'll say, this is like a add-on to genre. Personally, this is my tip to anyone writing sci-fi. I looked for agents who actually liked sci-fi, because the catch is many people might like one sci-fi book. They sell one speculative novel, but it's an exception, not a rule. If the majority of their roster is like fantasy or contemporary, and they sell one, that doesn't mean that they actually know, like love and understand the sci-fi industry. Sci-fi is so hard to sell in YA. When I queried the third time, I hyper-focused only on agents who had a depth of knowledge and love of science fiction. And I have zero regrets. That was the perfect decision, because an agent can like your one book, but that doesn't mean they know how to sell it, or that they'll like the next book you write. And I think that's the biggest risk if you sign with someone where like you're a fluke, basically. If that makes sense.
And I think kind of on that, there's only so much you can know ahead of time with research. Like I've never gotten past I've gotten full requests and that ended up getting rejected, but I've never gotten to like a call stage. But I feel like the call is where you really get to know more of the agent and see if you connect on that level. Like you can have your list of dream agents and maybe one of them is interested, but you get on the phone with them and the way they're talking about like what direction they see the story going in does not match with your vision. And that can be kind of jarring, but they're my dream agent. Like maybe they're right. Maybe I should do that. Like, you ahead of time research only goes so far.
Agree.
Because it's a personal connection thing. There's so many different stipulations and like aspects to the situation.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk, well, A, you just reminded me, editorial agents. I think we all are looking or looked for editorial agents. That's another important thing. I think the average writer nowadays wants one, and most agents are editorial, but that is another thing to look for. There are agents who do not do editing with their clients. They expect you to turn in a polished and submission-ready manuscript, and they won't offer representation if your book isn't at that level. Whereas other agents are looking for fixer-uppers, basically. They want to have a collaborative editorial relationship. That's important. So I want to talk about dream agents, and I want to talk about being open-minded, because what I learned over the course of querying 3 times, and also just observing friends, you can't control who falls in love with your manuscript. And so you should query smart and in a calculated manner, but widely. Don't second guess yourself and not query someone because you're not sure if they're going to love it, or you don't know if they're a perfect fit for you, because you just can't know it ahead of time. I queried my agent on a whim. Like, honestly, she tweeted something for a manuscript wish list. I was like, maybe she'd like this. She hadn't been on my list before that. And look what happened. And the call, and like she was perfect on the call. Like, we had the call and I was like, you are the business partner I want. But she wasn't my dream agent. And so I do not advocate having a dream agent, because I'll also tell you, my dream agent rejected me more than once. My dream agent didn't want any of my books. It happened more than once. I had that pain. I kept pushing for it. And the thing that I learned over time, I now know people who are represented by that dream agent. And I would not want to be with that dream agent.
Yeah, you can't know. Like, when you're asking us like what we look for in an agent, like the thing I look for in an agent is someone who meshes well with my style, which you can't tell from Publishers Marketplace or whatever.
Yes.
Do you want an agent who is going to like get on a phone call and discuss your next 3 potential projects and help you choose one? Or do you want an agent who just wants to see the finished one in their inbox? Yeah. Like, there's so many different, how much do you want to communicate? Do you want to be on a text basis, or do you want to talk once every 2 weeks via email? Like, so many variables.
Yes. When I queried my first agent, of course I had my dream agents that I was querying, because like I pretty much queried all of the agents of my favorite YA books. And
we all do. I mean, you should do it.
Right.
Everyone
because like you have dreams and aspirations, go for it. So the second book, though, I felt like I did query the agents that had interest in the first book. I'm like, well, they liked it the first time, maybe they'll like it this time, but they didn't. But they're still like in the back, like, oh yeah, I'll probably query them in 2019, but they're not like my dream agent anymore. It's just I want someone who connects with my book the most, and I'd rather have that who has less sales than like my dream agent who has 1 million sales. So.
Exactly.
I think one of the most like covetable qualities as an agent is someone who loves your work and who will champion you, because that's your job, is like selling you and hyping you up to editors and like being your cheerleader and your champion, and they'll go in and fight for you and negotiate better contracts. And if you have a problem with your cover or something that's going on, like in editing, some changes they want to make, you can go to your agent and you can express your problems, and they'll be the ones who take the battle to the publisher and who are like the ones who are like loud and demanding on your behalf. And so you don't have to like get your hands dirty. You get to maintain your great relationship with your editor, and your agent is out there like championing your work and like fighting for you.
Yep. Well, and you don't know that ahead of time usually, unless like
they call you
talk to clients and or you hear people gushing and you hear about their style. Oh, there was something I wanted to say, because I feel like we should probably shift into querying, because there's so much we can say about agents. Like, there's so much nuance in terms of how agents do business and things you want to look for. But this is my fault. I could have just made this entire episode about agents, but no, I had to cover agents and querying. Are there last things we want to kind of cover specifically about agents before we move into querying? Because I think we'll also cover stuff when we talk about how you're actually getting an agent.
I think we can just move into querying, because I feel like we'll jump back to a lot of agents. They're so interconnected.
Exactly. All right, querying. This, if you've never heard of querying, get ready for a fun ride. So, so this is where things get tricky, and this is where I think a lot of writers get really frustrated. Well, I think a lot of writers get frustrated that they have to use a literary agent, but I mean, I love them. I love that someone handles all my business stuff for me. It's great because I can just think about books for the most part. So, a query is a pitch letter for your book. You have to pitch your book, market your book in a way to a complete stranger. Your job in a single page is to get them to want to read your book. And queries are emailed to agents, but every agent has a different guideline. And the most important thing you can do is follow the guidelines, because if you don't follow the guidelines for your query, they won't even consider your book. There's a lot to research, there's a lot to learn, and there's a lot to master. So let's talk about what is actually in a query. What do you put in a query? Who wants to tackle it? Because I'm talking a lot.
I can, because I just realized I did do queries in 2018 for Author Mentor Match. Like I did write. So when this third book was the easiest I've ever written a query. My first two books, I don't think I knew how to write one. You research it, you look at it, but it all changed for me, I feel like, last summer when I finally got an outline of what you need to include. So the three things that I always follow when it comes to querying is what does your main character want? The second thing is what's in their way, which is the conflict. And then what happens if they don't get it, which is the stakes. Those three things, that's how I follow them. I think my query for Author Mentor Match was decently good. I
thought it was really good. Yeah.
I literally, it worked. So I got a mentor from it. But those are my three things that I always follow now when it comes to querying. And I've had success. So
I think it's important to stress that it is not a plot summary. And I actually think this is where a lot of people get off track. They think that they're like, I can't possibly do this in one page. I have to tell them everything about my book. No, you only have to tell them about the character, the conflict, and the stakes. Basically why should they want to read this? Another way I like to boil it down just in terms of structure beyond how to talk about your own book is the hook, the book, and the cook. That's the order. So your first line should be the hook, essentially your one-line pitch, maybe 2 lines. Then you talk about the book for a few paragraphs. And then the cook is you, because you also have to talk about yourself in a query. It's a business letter, and they want to know who you are. And we'll come back around to your biography, because I think this freaks a lot of people out, because they'll be like, I'm no one. I have no credentials. So we'll talk more about that. But that's another formula that's very helpful. And then I also encourage writers to think of it as back cover copy. Yeah. You can pick up any book on your shelf, open it, and look at the flap. Sometimes it's on the back. Your copy should be very similar to that, because that's what back cover copy does. It tells you who the main character is, what they want, and what's standing in their way, what they stand to lose if they don't get what they want. And usually that makes you want to check out the first page, doesn't it? And that's what your query is supposed to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will also say, oh shoot, what was I going to say? A query is also, like Alexa was saying, you aren't talking about the entire summary. You aren't talking about the whole book. It's just what they want, what's in their way, and what the stakes are. And those things should be established within about the first 50 pages of your manuscript. Yep. The query really covers just those first 50 pages of your manuscript. And don't be afraid to get into details, because agents want to know what's special about this. If you just say, oh, there's a student at a school and a new student shows up and something mysterious is happening, what the F does that mean?
Fake stakes. I hate the fake stakes.
Yeah. Which might work fine if you're doing a 1-page summary of the entire book, like a synopsis, but for a query, it's all about pitch. It's all about hook. You just want to be talking about the first 50 or so pages, that setup section of your novel. And if you want to talk about the first 100 or so pages in your query, then that might actually be a symptom that your novel pacing is a little bit off, and you don't get to the inciting incident and the setup and the good stuff in those first 50 pages.
I think it depends on the book because my query for Brightly Burning 100% went past page 100.
Yeah, it does depend on the book, and it depends on what your first.
Well, it's about act structure. It's about act structure.
About that plot twist as well, and like how much you lead into that and how much you lead after. There's so much we could talk about this forever.
we could literally. So I think what's important to stress. So let's talk about vague stakes or, kind of broad stakes, because the other one that doesn't work very well that I see a lot is people be like, the world's gonna end or people will die if the main character fails. I'm like, that's not personal. Mm-hmm. Your job is to make the agent care, and you do that through character. That's why query should be character focused. It's not, this is all the shit going on in my plot. This is the person around whom the story centers. This is why you should care about them, and this is the terrible thing that will happen. That's personal, and it can't just be the world ending if stuff doesn't go well. And I think that a lot of people are too broad, and they don't narrow in on the heart of their book, which should be your main character if you've done your job.
Even if you're writing a very plot-driven action novel, like, stories are about changes that happen to characters. So even if there's a lot of external stuff going on, like, you need to focus on the heart of the change your main character goes through from beginning to end.
Yeah, and I think that's what I see. Well, at least with my first two queries, like, I was putting just too much information in that. And like when you finally just strip it down to, and I have like multiple POVs, I only focused on one character for the POVs. Just to kind of, I mentioned the other two, but it was just focused on one, so the agent or whoever could connect to it faster than having to be like, oh, there's this character and all these different things going on. Just focus on like one path, like the main path.
You shouldn't be mentioning more than like 3 characters in your query. Like, your main character should be the focus, and maybe you mention a love interest and a villain. Like that, and maybe you can, if you can focus just on the main character and like maybe their one most important relationship and talk about like the 2 characters, that's good.
Yeah. And I'll say also just about spoilers, you should not spoil your book in your query. And I'll tell you, this was a learning lesson for me on my first book, because I kept saying, if I don't spoil the ending, they're not going to want to read the book, because the most interesting thing about the hook of the book is the ending. And I was like, oh, you have a problem with your book, Alexa. And I had to make it more interesting. This led to revision, honestly, when I realized, oh, my query. You should spoil at best into Act 2. Do not spoil your midpoint turn, and do not spoil your ending. And if you need to do that to make your book sound interesting, something's wrong with your book, in my humble opinion.
You're not getting to the interesting part fast enough in your book then.
Exactly. Or something's off.
Which we have a whole section about talking about how you can diagnose mistakes with your book based on query rejection. So
synopses. Synopses can also identify problems with your book. So let's talk more about the nuts and bolts of a query. Let's talk about personalization. Okay. I think that's because there are different schools of thought on this. So did you guys personalize? Well, what does personalization mean? Lainey, do you want to take it since you were talking about it earlier?
Yeah. So with personalization, I always put it in the front of the query, and it's just like one line about why you think that agent wants to represent your book. That can be, I saw that you liked 6 of Crows in your manuscript wish list, and I have a book with multiple POVs and it has to do with a heist or something like that. Just to let them know that you researched them and you are personally reaching out to them versus just mass emailing a bunch of agents. So I always do a personalization. I think I'll do that again in 2019, but I know it's like, it varies. Like, I've seen successful pitches or queries that didn't personalize their queries and they ended up with an agent and all is good. I think it's a preference thing, but I'm going to do it. So
I also like to personalize, and it is kind of hard because some agents, you just don't know enough about them. So you're like, how do I personalize? Yeah. And you really can't. But in general, at the very least, like, I would start off my queries with that. I'd be like, I'm reaching out to you because you represent this author and you enjoy speculative fiction with romance, but whatever the personalization is that they like, kind of thing. I just start with that as like my first sentence, as like, I'm querying you for this reason. I think you might be interested in my manuscript, title, word count, genre, and then jump pitch kind of thing.
I am here to represent the anti-personalization camp. So I think personalization has a time and a place. And also, this is where researching agents is important, because when you dig in, you'll find a lot of agents don't like personalization or don't care. Mm-hmm. So when I found agents who said that, I didn't bother to personalize. Like, so for example, Susie Townsend, because she used to answer asks on the New Leaf Tumblr all the time, she hates kind of shallow personalization. She actually doesn't want you to tell her what she represents, because she already knows. She doesn't want you to tell her what she likes, because she already knows. Which the first time I saw her say that, I was like, she blew my mind. I was like, what? It made me second guess everything I had ever done with personalization. But it means that specific agent doesn't want you to personalize unless it's really specific. A lot of agents just want to get to the hook of your book as soon as possible. They want the first line of your query to be the hook of your book. Some agents just prefer that. So you need to do your research. Whereas agents who say, if someone doesn't personalize, I throw out their query. There are agents who are like that as well. So you need to do your research, one.
Yeah.
But two, when you don't know enough about an agent, I give you full permission not to personalize. If you've written a good query and your hook is excellent, you don't need to personalize. I firmly believe that. Because the other thing with personalization that bugs me is that when you personalize, you're reversing the query form. So there is a format to a query. The traditional one that I like is hook, 2 to 3 paragraphs about the book, a paragraph about the book, which has the title, the word count, the genre, and your comps. We're going to talk about comps. Then your bio paragraph. I love that model. I think it flows. You should only front load your query with your title, word count, and comps if your comps are like killer. But otherwise, personalizing first to me throws off the rhythm, because your hook goes in the, like, it pushes the hook further down and makes it less likely that they're going to read your pages. I just have feelings. But that said, when I did Brightly Burning, I started with my comps. I started with my hook because it was strong. And I did end up personalizing most of my queries, but that's because I was 4 years into the publishing world and I actually only queried agents I had specific things to say about. So personalize if it's good personalization. That's my recommendation. So like when I queried Jennifer Udden, I genuinely was able to say, I have been listening to your podcast since the very first episode, and I love that you're from Harry Potter fandom. So am I. I think you might like this. That is super specific.
Yeah.
That's my recommendation. So you are off the hook if you hate personalization, but it can be, if it's good personalization, it can make a difference.
Mm-hmm. I think that circles back to just, you need to research a lot.
Yes.
Wants to know why you're querying them or doesn't care. Like it boils down to so much research. Yeah. And it's stuff that like we can't even tell you specifics in this show, because you have to just research each individual agent. There's so many agents, so many variables.
And it's down. It's down to you as well. Like, agents also don't like if you say, oh, I love the work of XYZ, and they can tell you haven't actually read their client's books. That agents get that all the time, where they'll say, I really love X book, and the agent's like, that book isn't out yet. So they know that the person was just like, so I personally only mention authors or books if I genuinely love them.
And another big thing is, don't lie in a query. Don't name drop an author or say that you met the agents at a conference when you really didn't. Like, it's such a bad move. Yeah. They will know. Like, even though agents can receive like hundreds of queries a day, like if you write a query like, we met at Comic-Con, and the agent's like, no, we didn't. Like, you can't treat an agent like that. Or they say like, oh yeah, I got an offer of representation from this agent, so now I'm querying you to see if you want to do a competing offer.
Don't lie.
Publishing is so small. That agent just needs to call their agent friend and be like, did you offer rep on this? And they'll be like, nope. And then you're like, and then like they all tell all their agent friends, like, this person is saying they got an offer from. It's just, don't lie in your query. Don't act like you have connections you don't. Just don't.
And so that also includes name dropping authors as referrals.
Yeah.
So, well, I'll say, like,
even if you're friends with an author, unless you have their permission and their recommendation to name drop them, don't do it.
Exactly. And oh God, something just flew out of my brain, something very clever. Let's talk about comps while I try to remember what I was just thinking of. So what are comps? I think comps also freak people out with queries. So comps are comparative titles. You should have a paragraph in your query, the one where you say, my book is called this is the genre, this is the word count, and it's complete. I skipped the most important thing. You can't query agents until your book is complete.
Yes, that is very, very important. You might hear stories of some rare exceptions, but they are rare exceptions.
So comparative titles are very important. There are exceptions where you don't have to use them, but the reason you use comparative titles is you are telling the agent where your book would sit on the shelf, or what readers who are fans of an existing author might also like your work. It gives them that kind of angle on the book. So something I heard that I was really surprised by, but really like made an impression on me. Joanna Volpe at New Leaf Literary said on a panel that I went to once that they actually usually take the comps from the query and they use them for submission. So they care that much about comps in the query. They pay attention to what potential clients are saying about their book. And the right comps can get more money for a book. So it's important that you're well read and that you know where your book fits in the market.
But you also have to actually give valid comps. These days I see so many comps of it's Throne of Glass and something else. And
it's Harry Potter
has become sort of useless because every high fantasy these days is Throne of Glass meets something else, because Throne of Glass has just kind of become like the standard for our current YA new adult fantasy kind of genre. So like that kind of comp, like it's kind of useless.
Yeah, and I also heard that you want to also use titles that have recently come out within like the past couple years in the industry.
Yeah. Or just very big titles, like if your book, or like Jane Eyre in Space, something like that, where you know,
I had no comps, by the way. I didn't need them because I had that pitch.
Jane Eyre in Space.
But that's a unicorn book situation. Yeah. And this can be really tricky. I'm not gonna lie, authors, you're slightly justified in freaking out because you also really do have to know the industry. If you comp something that sold poorly, that can count against you. And very often you guys don't know how books sell, but we do. So you have to be a little careful. But yeah, anything older than 3 years, you have to be very careful with it. Anything massively popular is useless for a comp. Also, anything old, don't comp. Honestly, I'm on the fence about The Giver. That's the first one that popped into my mind. But don't comp The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe or Lord of the Rings. Anything that's a classic, considered a classic, isn't going to be relevant to the current market.
Unless it's storytelling or something.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing that comes up with comparative titles is media comps. So can you comp TV, movies, video games? Yes, especially if that's part of your pitch. If it helps them distill exactly what your book is. So I'm so bad at X-Men meets Where the Red Fern Grows. That's very weird. Don't use it. But like, you know, like you can definitely use a strong TV or movie comp, but never use TV or movie comps instead of book comps or author comps. So if you can't find a specific book, you can say my work will appeal to fans of Laini Taylor. You can say that. That gives them an idea of voice, tone, style, and theme. So there are different ways to comp, but comps are important. And then go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, my comp titles are 2 movies and a YA book, because
that's perfect.
The movies are pretty, I don't know, alike to what I wrote, but then also I wanted to throw in a YA title because I want the agent or whoever to know that I know the YA market.
Yeah,
because 2 movies won't tell an agent that, but the book will.
Yes. And comps can just get an agent so excited about a book. It really works in your favor to nail your comps, and it can take a while to kind of get the perfect ones. So just a brief note, you are going to include your word count. And this is just a friendly reminder that you should do research on standard word counts for your genre.
And in general, good rule of thumb, under 100K.
Yes.
Under 100
for a debut.
If you're writing a YA debut, which we are like in the YA world, so that's what our primary focus is. But yeah, 100,000 words or less. 70 or 80 is a nice sweet spot. But anything over 100K is going to raise an eyebrow because it might tell the agent that you haven't revised it enough on your own. You don't know how to edit. You haven't been able to cut it down. Yeah.
So someone asked in the chat, reminded me that we didn't actually cover it just briefly. The standard agent commission is 15% on your domestic sale, essentially your initial book sale. Standard for sub rights, so we're looking, that's film, TV, audio. Standard varies. It could be 20%. It could be 25%. If it's as high as 30%, you need to ask some freaking questions. That's a little bit high. But it does happen sometimes because of sub-agents. So that's just to know when you're doing your agent research and your agency research, specifically for your like US book deal. If you're based here, if that's your first book deal, like where they're making the initial sale, if they're doing anything higher than 15%, you need to ask some real questions.
Yeah.
And
we have a flag because 15% is industry standard. Yeah. And like even so many of the very top agents stay at 15%. So like if anyone is going more than that for basic domestic rights, like that's definitely something that you need to ask them about and consider their sales and like if that is worth it, because that is, especially 30% is a very drastic, double the standard industry rate. I also want to say, I saw a quick question that said a minimum word count for querying. And like
depends on your genre.
Yeah. Like for YA contemporary, you can get away with like a low 50K, maybe even like a 45K.
Maybe even, so Dear Martin, Nick Stone's book is 40K.
Yeah, you can get away with a very short one, but again, 50 to 100K is your sweet spot.
Yeah.
Like if you're in that range, you're not going to raise any eyebrows with word count. Anything lower or higher might get a kind of thing. And like you can still pull it off. There are books, debut novels that are like 120K that work, and that's fine. But
they are unicorns. And so I people always bring up the exceptions, and I'm like, unless you're like the most incredible writer to grace this planet, I really wouldn't use an exception as your role model.
Yeah.
Aim for the middle. Industry standard. We can cover a few quick questions that are coming up in the chat, and then we're going to talk about the super fun one, which is how do you know when you're ready to query? Someone asked if 85K is good for a YA fantasy. Yeah, that's a very nice sweet spot word count. And I should say the other reason they don't like high word counts on debuts, by the way, is that it is more expensive to print longer books. Okay. It takes more paper and it takes up more space on the shelf. So that's another reason.
From everybody involved, your copy editor, your editor, anyone who has to read it and help market, like it's just more time involved.
Yeah. That's why most debuts are not allowed to write a 600-page book, with some exceptions. Plus, 99% of the time, if you're a new writer, if your book is 600 pages, you have a structural and a pacing problem, probably.
So before we get into when is the right time to query, let's talk about bio paragraphs. What do you include in your bio paragraph? What do agents want to know about you? Why do you have to talk about yourself in a bio paragraph? You're trying to sell your book.
Well, first of all, we're all cheaters in the sense that like we don't have to worry. What we would put in ours is I have a YouTube channel about writing in books and I have X number of subscribers. Like it's anything you do that is relevant to writing.
I literally started my channel because I was getting ready to query, and all the agent websites and blogs advised like start an author platform. Like it's never too early to start an author platform and to start, making aspiring author connections and kind of being a little established in the literary world. So I started my channel with that in mind, and it worked better than expected.
Whoops.
Which is actually part of the reason why I stayed back from querying for the last few years, is because now I have a subscriber count I can drop in my bio that will get attention. but now I'm like that much more concerned that my book has to be excellent because I don't want to get attention just for my audience. Like I want it to be about the book, and then the audience is just like a bonus kind of thing. So it really changed my stance of how much I care about the quality of the book. Like I'm never going to query too early again because I'm afraid that like a crappy book will get published. So yeah.
So the rule of thumb, like, so I'll tell in my bio paragraph, so I have a degree in a writing related field. So that was a no-brainer for me. I was able to say I have a BA in journalism from X university. Like that can get you by if you don't have much else. And honestly, even if your degree isn't related to writing, your bio paragraph could simply be, I have a degree in XYZ from ABC and I live in Des Moines, Iowa. Well, I don't know why that just came into my head, but like you can have your bio could be one line, or it could be, I live in Des Moines with 3 cats and too many books. That technically is a bio paragraph. If you don't have a lot to say, and you also don't have to say this is my first novel, because trust me, they're going to assume it's your first novel, that you're unpublished if you are unpublished, because if you're published, you would say that in your bio paragraph. Any professional credits that relate to writing or the writing community. So in my paragraph, I put that I was a mod for the YA writer subreddit. That was something I put in there. I put that I ran a Harry Potter conference because it was relevant to writing. But it's anything that's kind of relevant, but don't be afraid to have it be short and sweet.
Yeah. I mean, I also have a degree in writing, or in English, but I put that in it's like 2 sentences, if that long. It just says I have a degree and I have a YouTube channel, and that's pretty much all I say in my bio. It should not be that long at all. It should be like 1 or 2 sentences.
Yeah, a couple of sentences max.
Yeah.
My bio paragraph when I first queried, it was I think I had a blog, but not a YouTube channel yet. So like, I think I mentioned the blog, but otherwise I just said like I'm currently a student studying creative writing, and I said like this is I think I said I am unpublished.
Everyone does that when they're first starting with queries. It's fine.
I might have mentioned, they also like to know like if you're querying widely sometimes, or like if you've submitted to editors. So I think I had a line about that, like I'm querying widely, but my work has not been submitted to editors or something like that.
Okay.
Because sometimes they do want to know like who's seeing your query, like how many people are you sending out. Yeah. But it doesn't have to be fancy. A couple sentences about who you are, where you live, what kind of foot, if you have a foot in the publishing industry, what it is.
And I should say something very important. You don't have to say your age in your query. This comes up a lot with teenagers or young writers. Don't say your age in your query. And actually, if you are a teen writer, this is a case where if you just want to not have a bio paragraph, I actually think you might be able to get away with it if the book is good enough. Because sometimes you do have to actually obscure your age on a query if you are very young. But same thing, you shouldn't say like, I actually think avoiding age in a query is a good idea, because you also don't want to, like, let's say you're writing YA, you don't want to say that like, if you don't want someone to consider that you're too old, because I don't think you can be too old to write YA, but some people have biases. That's my point. Don't say you're a teenager.
You don't mention your age.
Yes.
In the query, like once an agent requests a full and maybe they want a phone call, then is the time, if you're under 18, to be like, FYI, I'm a teenager. Like parents might need to get involved signing the contract. I don't know exactly how that works, but what you can deal with age and your agent like once you actually have more of a relationship. It's not, you don't need to start with that.
And one last very important thing about bios, they shouldn't be longer than the book. Your query shouldn't have more about you than your book, and never ever open your query with you, because usually queries that open that way talk about themselves for 4 paragraphs and then say nothing about the book. So
what if
short and sweet.
What if someone has a big YouTube platform though? Like, isn't it sometimes good if you have a large platform that's related to publishing to open?
Okay, you can open with that, but keep it short.
Literally 2 sentences max about yourself, the rest for the book. You only have 250 words to like work with here.
I did more than 2 sentences about myself.
It's about 2 sentences.
It was a healthy paragraph, okay?
You did a lot. It's fine.
Okay, so let's move on from the nitty gritty and the format. Let's talk. Like, this was the most asked question when we asked people to submit questions to us. How do you know when a book is good enough to query? And go.
You don't, and you often query the first book too soon and get rejected. And
I think we all do.
Yeah.
I think it's just a rite of passage.
Yeah, it is. And before you do it yourself, you hear that and you're like, well, I'll be different.
Oh, same. Yes. I was such an asshole.
And even you hear it and you know it, but you have to actually experience it to learn it is just the thing.
Yeah.
You learn by doing. And I think that's a thing with writing, period, that's very frustrating for people. You learn how to write a book by writing a book. You learn how to query and navigate this industry by doing it. Yeah. And sometimes that means falling flat on your face.
Yeah.
Aside from going too early, like how can you actually tell if it's the right time to query? Like, what are some more practical tips?
Well, both times that I tried querying, I was not ready whatsoever. And I'm glad that I never got agents off those two books, because I think it just would have been way harder to navigate from there. And I talked about this once in a video about when I submitted to Author Mentor Match, even though it's not really querying, but it is. I felt so much better going into it. Like, I knew that book needed a lot of work, because I mean, obviously that's why I wanted a mentor. But when I did my submission materials for that, I felt so much better about it than I have ever in anything else I've ever submitted. And I don't know if I think my mindset is just better now. And I think I needed all those learning experiences leading up to that to feel confident in sending my writing out again.
Yeah.
This is also where about how we talked about it a little bit, not last week, 2 weeks ago. Critique partners are so valuable. Having another person read your book, and if they give you feedback, then you know that you're not quite ready yet. Which, like, the first time I did I got feedback and I ignored it and queried anyways, and that's why I didn't get an agent on that first book.
Yeah.
But yeah, having other people, critique partners, beta readers, a friend who can just read it, and even if they're not involved in the publishing industry, just give like their opinion on it, can just help give you ideas. Yeah. Although having like more objective critique partners rather than like your mom is a better judge of like if you're ready to go, because your mom is gonna say yes, she's gonna say it's perfect, query it.
And this harkens back to advice about critique partners. One of my biggest tips when you're looking for them is you need to find critique partners who, as best as you can gauge, their writing is at either a similar level to yours or what you think you're at or what you want to be at. Meaning critique partners where you trust their professional opinion, essentially, because you think they're good enough. So you want to hear from them, and you can say, hey, do you think this is query ready or close? How close do you think I am? So it's kind of surrounding yourself by people you trust, because when you are writing and editing in a vacuum, you never know if you're ready. But generally, I'd say the first question to ask yourself is, have I revised this book? The answer is no, you are not ready to query. That said, I will say when you get more experience with writing and editing, you can still query too soon, but query with less revision. So I'm again a horrible person. So I revised Brightly Burning in less than 10 days, and then I queried it immediately. It worked out though. I'm so sorry.
The unicorn.
Sometimes it works out, but most of the time it doesn't. And
let me share, to be fair, there are good and bad times of the year to query. One, so when do you know you're ready to query? You have to gauge your work against timing. And two, I knew I was writing in a subgenre that was having a moment and was about to saturate. So I did rush to query. So it wasn't that I knew I was ready. I knew I was ready enough. I just had to get it to be good enough, because if you are targeting editorial agents, they don't expect you to query a perfect book. You just have to make the book as good as you can make it on your own, but with critique partners. So it's not about doing a perfect book. And I actually don't think people should revise for years and years and years. Sometimes querying is a really interesting test of where you are on a book and if it's worth your time. So I think it's worth us talking about when you query and realize very quickly that it's the wrong book. It's not the right book to debut with. It's not getting the response you wanted. What are some of your, what have been our experiences with querying not working out? And what did we learn from it?
Well, my first book was it was just weird because I had a worse experience querying my second book than I did my first book, which is weird to me. But with the first book, I sent queries out in batches. So I would query maybe 5 or 6 agents. And within those 5 or 6 agents, I would query people that had a lot of sales, people that were kind of newer but still had some clients. I wanted to vary it. I didn't want to send all the top agents right away and then get rejected from all of them. So I kind of stacked it in a more organized way. And once I would start getting responses back, every batch I sent out for that first book, I always had a full request in there. So I'm just so it's working for some people, but it's not working for some people. So it was really hard for me to gauge that. And then with my second book, it was just all rejection. So it was hard, but I think that next time will be different.
Well, so hold on. Dealing with a commenter. Don't leave nasty comments, guys. We'll delete them from the live chat.
I think something important to remember is it's so subjective. Is the agent who you're meant to be with even open to queries, right? When you're querying, you might miss out on some agents because they're just not open, or you might query an agent and just something about your query just doesn't pop enough on the day that they're reading 100 queries and clearing out their inbox, and it just doesn't catch their attention in that 2 minutes. That doesn't mean you're a bad writer. It doesn't mean the book is bad. That agent, you can still query them in the future, and they might love your next book. They might love this one if they gave it a chance, but agents are just people who are looking through pitches and trying to find something that stands out and really clicks with them, and you can't control that. So you can't control so much about querying, and that's a big thing. You have to kind of give that up, and it's one of the first stages in writing where you really don't have any control. You can control the writing yourself, you can control revising and finishing it, but now you're involving someone else saying yes or no to it, and you have no control over that. They might be in a bad mood, having a bad day, half asleep, reading queries, and they reject yours, and you have to not take that personal and not take it as I'm a terrible writer just because it didn't really click with them. Most agents only accept a handful of clients every year, and they get hundreds of queries every day. So it's hard.
Yeah.
And this brings up something you just sparked a thing for me that I forgot to mention that I think is so important. It took me a long time to learn this, actually, because it's going to hurt every time you feel rejected. It's going to feel personal. An agent has to read the books that they sign usually 3, 4, 5 times. The same thing with an editor. When they buy your book, your editor could read your book 8 times. So they can only sign, in the case of an agent, or buy, in the case of an editor, a book that they want to read over and over again. You have think of the level of love you have to have for writing in a book to do that. I'm still shocked at how my agent sometimes reads my book more than I do. And I'm like, why, you poor thing? But apparently she likes it. That's great. And so that's the level you have to hit. That's why when they say vaguely, it wasn't the right fit for me, I just didn't connect to it the way I hoped to, these form rejections that we get, we hate how nebulous they are. What does it mean? And it literally just means they didn't love it enough. Think about any book you pick up to read. There's certain authors and certain books that you love enough to reread that book over and over. And there are others where you're like, I read it. It was fine. And that's what you always have to bear in mind with agents.
And it's hard. A lot of the full rejections that I got, rejections on my full manuscript, were things like, I think you're a good writer. I don't think it's right for the market. It's just not quite strong enough. And that feels like such a defeat. But really, you're getting so close when you're getting things like that, because another agent could feel differently. It's good enough to get to that level where they read it and enjoy it, they just don't love it enough to take it on themselves and to like take on that load of work. So I think that's the hardest part of querying, is getting those close call rejections.
Yeah, and like with those close call, some of those close call ones that I've gotten, they're like, but we'd love, or I'd love to see something new from you in the future. And I'm like, encouraging, but still a rejection.
Yes. Well, but here's the thing. So people are also always asking, well, how do you know when a book is working, when you're close? When you start getting personal rejections, you have something. Even if it's not this book, it's your writing. An agent saying, send me your next book, means you're good enough. It's just not the right fit. It's not the right moment. It's not the right project, or not the right agent. So people also asked a lot of questions about how do you know when to stop querying? So maybe we can talk about that a bit. And then I do want to circle back, like Lainey, you brought up your strategy. We should talk about strategy. Like how do you actually query? Because mine's actually very similar to yours. So we'll talk more about that. But we also got a lot of questions of people asking how many agents, when you've queried X agents, how do you know when to stop? There's no neat answer for that, but do you guys have a philosophy? Like, was there a number point at which you stopped? Was it the feedback? Was it's all form rejections? Was it a ratio of requests to rejections? Like, how did you guys navigate that with your previous books?
Well, I think saying like falling out of love with the story sounds so horrible, but I felt like with the first one, it was like, I know I can write something better than this. I don't want this to be my debut. I don't want to be represented by it anymore. So I kind of just stopped querying that one altogether. Despite having interest, I'm just like, I want to move on to the next thing. And then with the second book, I just realized there was just so much change I needed to make to it. So I stopped querying it because of the issues the book had, even though I'm still working on it actively. It just wasn't the right time to query that at all. So I think I sent about 30 queries to each before I stopped. I think it was about 30 for each.
Yeah, for me as well, I didn't have as much of a strategy because this was like 7 years ago when I wasn't as knowledgeable about publishing, and I was still like learning a lot. But I do remember that I don't think I sent more than like 30 queries for either of the projects that I like extensively queried, just because in doing all my research, like, you know, I had a list of like the 30 agents or so that I wanted to query, like my A list, my B list, and my C list. And by the time I made it through most of them, like there are obviously tons of other agents, but at that point I was like, they're lower down on my list, you know, they don't quite represent exactly what I want. Like I thought these would be the better fits and they aren't. So like that is kind of the sign about like, you know, I made it through all my top agents. I don't want to sign with like whatever agent will just take me for whatever reason. I want like a real business partner. And if my top 30 said no, then it's probably not that I need to query more. It's that I need to write another book, query something different.
So I think we're just all going to agree. And our therefore thoughts and advice might differ from other people. Because I've heard so many people give the advice, query 100 agents. Query 125. I got my agent on 125, and I don't like to give that advice to most people. I do think there are certain genres or types of books where there might be 100 agents who would be good for the book. I also tapped out at around 30. Really 27, I think, was my magical number. I queried 27 people for Brightly Burning. For my first book, it was 18. But that's because of the contest thing. I kind of didn't query as widely. And then my second one, I think I tapped out at 23, meaning the response was not good. I was like, it's not working. I feel exactly the same way. It was about like, this no longer feels like the right debut for me. Or if I can't get any of these 27, I don't want anyone. I'd rather write a better book to attract the attention of one of these. And especially when you're getting the responses that say, not this book, send me your next one, then it is, of course, worth to be like, okay, then I'll write the next one. And so that doesn't mean 30 is a hard and fast number, but we all write science fiction and fantasy YA. And I think it's because there are only so many good science fiction and fantasy YA agents.
Yeah. And also,
right now.
There are a lot of agents, but they'll all be at the same industry or at the same agency, I mean.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
a general rule of thumb is you only query one agent at an agency, because like if they enjoy it and they think it's good enough, they'll pass it on to someone who might be a better fit at the agency if it's
depends on the agency. Yes. And we didn't even talk about, what a fun nuance we skipped over,
Right.
which this is about following the guidelines, but you do need to watch out for that. Some agencies have a policy where you can only query one agent at that agency and then you're done.
All of them might represent your genre, and you have to like really read their profiles and be like,
so hard.
Like, how do you choose? You can't like talk
regrets forever.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the big ones I can think of is Andrea Brown. I think it was Andrea Brown. To this day, I'm like, did I query the right one?
Yeah.
Because you never know. Whereas there are other ones. So New Leaf is a good example. My agency's like this as well. You query one at a time. And if one rejects you, you can query another agent because they don't share queries. So you have to do your research again. It's all about research. And so let's talk about strategy, because I think it sounds like all of us had A, B, and C lists, basically. So that's the first piece of advice. You should definitely be categorizing agents. My A, B, and C list was a weird combination of like industry experience and sales and what I perceived to be personality and business fit. So as best I could tell from my research, I was like, I really love this person. So they'd be on the A list. So the B list, there would be top agents on it as well, but maybe I knew less about them or I wasn't as sure. So I personally encourage having your A, B, and C list not just be top agents, middle agents, agents. I think there should be good top agents in each of your groups and middle of the road agents in each of your groups. There shouldn't be any bad agents on your list.
Yeah, that's just worthless. That's pointless.
Don't query anyone you wouldn't actually want to be represented by. I don't do this.
And you're just wasting everyone's time.
Well, and also if they offer, what I've seen happen more than once is someone queries someone they don't really want to be represented by them, but they're desperate. They're feeling rejected. They're querying 100 agents. And then that's the one agent who offers. And then they don't have the balls. And I don't blame them, but they don't turn down the offer. They accept the offer because it's their only offer. And I'm like, you just threw away 2 years of your career. I have so many feelings. We should do an episode just on bad agents.
Yeah, we'll also do another episode about that because
I have so much to say.
Lainey and I are planning on querying in the new year, so.
And I will be analyzing your query list.
We'll have to do like another agent in querying sometime next year, with some more experience under our belts.
Oh, I have so many opinions. But so A, B, and C lists. And the other metric I did, and this is where you need to get a pro query tracker account, that $25 for a year. Best money I ever spent.
Yeah.
Because you can see how quickly agents respond to queries.
Right.
Oh, it's the best thing ever. And I also sorted my agents by response time. And I approached my querying rounds based on a combination. I would make sure there were top agents and kind of agents I was less sure about in every round. And I queried based on response time. So my test query batch was 5 agents, I think, who responded within most of them 1 to 2 days, some of them up to a week. Yeah. And that's how I tested whether my query worked.
Yeah.
What other kind of strategy things did you guys do? Like, how did you decide who to query and rounds, batches?
I also did experience too, like people who have been agents for 10 plus years, and then agents that have been agents for less than 5, because I don't want to discredit the ones that might not be agents for very long, even though they're from a reputable agency, because those ones tend to be the hungriest. They want to take you in and like take you places, I guess what I'm trying to say. And they want to get the deals. So like they're very determined. And that's also a trait I really like as well.
Yeah. I agree with that. I know we had a question about like, do you query new agents? Like, how do you feel about agents who don't have a lot of sales? And yeah, exactly what Lainey just said. Like they're can be hungrier for it. They're ready to like fight for you and really get in there. But you do want to make sure that they are at the very least at a reputable agency or have like worked at a different agency before striking on their own, or have worked as an editor or worked somewhere in the publishing industry before and do have like some experience in the industry, or have someone with a lot of experience guiding them and kind of acting as a mentor, just so you know that you do have that experience backing, even if the individual has been agenting for a year and doesn't have many sales, but they want that. And so like you could be their big sale, you could be the one who like makes their name, but you just you never know.
Yep. It's worth mentioning that agenting is an apprentice-based industry. So it really is all about who mentors you, who teaches you the business. And it's like a feedback cycle. So a great agent will train great agents, and mediocre agents won't be able to help much. So looking at their mentor at their agency is very, very important. Looking at their background. So for example, an agent could be new, but if they worked at a Big Five publisher as an editor for 5 years, odds are pretty good they're going to be able to sell books on the agenting side. A great example of that, my editor left editing to be an agent, and in her first year of agenting got like 5-6-figure deals. Like, so clearly there were people who queried her. She had no sales, but it worked out. I actually referred a lot of people to her because I was like, she's pretty great. So so that's kind of new agents versus more established agents. And as Kat said, there's real value. You can grow with a new agent. You could be their breakout client, and then you become their top client. Whereas if you sign with a bigger agent who has a large roster or already has superstars, you're never going to get that attention. Which actually brings me to an important question or thing to try to gauge and research. Or I should just say, let's talk about big agents versus small agents in terms of lists. Because when you're researching and thinking about fit, do you want to be one of 50 clients where the agent has a superstar and you are not the superstar, but you're okay with that because they're going to get you a great book deal, but maybe you work with an assistant sometimes? Or do you want to be on a small list with an agent who gives you a lot of personal attention? That's something that you need to research.
And decide for yourselves.
Decide for yourself.
What you personally like, I personally care less about the agent's list size and more about their investment in the industry, which is a potential worry with newer agents. Like, are they going to still be an agent in 3 years?
Yeah.
That's an important factor to consider, because like the agents do come and go and leave this business, leave the industry. And if your agent leaves after 3 years, like, first of all, they're still on whatever contracts they negotiated for you and forever getting that 15% of any future royalties. But also now you're agentless and you have to like go find a new one. And that can really affect your career right when you're getting started or in the middle of it, whenever it happens.
Well, and so it's when you're researching and looking, you should consider agency size and establishment versus boutique. Because you do take that risk. If you sign with an agent who has a boutique agency, like it's just them or just them and a few people, and they are newer, if they leave, what happens to you? And that is a question that you ask on the call. But you may also decide for yourself, you really don't want to query agents who have a one-person shop, unless they're like a massive name. Every once in a while that does happen. So meaning like, I would have no hesitation querying Holly Root because it's Holly Root. But like if it's a one-woman operation and you're like, what are your sales? Like how do you run your agency? There is definitely safety in going with a large established agency. Because if your agent retires, usually you stay with the agency, and you certainly know they're not going to go out of business, so you'll get paid properly. Oh God. I think what we're just proving is that this is a very complicated and complex topic. There's so much to talk about. We keep thinking of new things. I didn't even like remember, like we could talk about shark agents versus other agenting styles, but we're at almost an hour and a half. So I think we will save that. Maybe we can do just a whole episode on agent like styles and red flags, maybe, because the shark agent style is something that not a lot of people talk about, and it can be really huge with querying. Like if you know you'd be unhappy, a shark is just a very aggressive sales-driven agent. And if you know that's going to make you unhappy because you need some TLC, don't query agents like that because you would be miserable even if they offered. Let's maybe try to answer some specific questions. Because we have a ton. And if what you were curious about doesn't get addressed in this live chat, we'll do follow-up episodes. And there were so many questions, I'm probably going to do my own kind of querying Q&A on my channel.
I do want to encourage you guys to not be afraid to do your own research. Like, the more research you do on your own, like searching these in Google and just like click the first 10 results and read a bunch of blog posts from other aspiring authors and read stories about other authors got their agents and what their strategies were. Take the time to do the research. Not only is it good for you to have an understanding and to know this yourself, but you become more invested the more you do your own research. Like, we can tell you all this stuff, but the hands-on actually doing it yourself is where you really learn the most and like can really get the most out of it.
Agree. And join writer community. This is why you should join writer communities. There are hashtags on Twitter. So like, even if Pitch Wars isn't happening, even if Author Mentor Match isn't happening, or you don't get in, you can join those communities. And that's where you find similar aspiring writers. Those communities have a lot of value. Write On Con is coming up. They're going to have free forums. I highly recommend checking them out if you are a querying writer or curious about this. Just looking through some of the forums, or even attending the con. It's online. I think the lowest registration is only $10, and I think the highest is only $25. Maybe they raised it to $35, but I highly recommend it. There's going to be a ton of sessions, blogs and podcasts and videos and whatnot about all of this stuff, including some agents are going to do live pitches for Write On Con. So that's kind of my, if you want to dive in, that's my recommendation. It's the second weekend of February coming up.
Oh, I have another resource I want to shout out, Query Shark, which I'm not sure if it doesn't update regularly.
But the archives are so valuable.
That's where I learned back in the day. Writers will submit anonymous queries to an agent, and she would like ruthlessly critique them and like just give like honest feedback. And it was an amazing learning experience because you got to see like actual writers submitting their actual queries, and then what an actual agent would do to like help improve the pitch and help direct them. And just reading those archives just will help you like understand and learn, and you'll start to see like what makes a good query. You'll start to learn how to critique yourself and be able to be like, oh, this is not the right format. Like, it's all about learning self-revision and stuff. And you can do that through examples like that.
Yeah, I agree.
So do we want to try to get to a few questions? We can maybe go to 145 if that's not pushing it, since it's such a huge topic.
Yeah, it's such a big topic.
All right. So we have like, we logged all of your questions, and it's a lot. Like, Lainey, were there any that jumped out to you that we should cover?
Oh, well, I don't know. Did we kind of talk about first book querying already?
We kind of did, but it's worth just kind of covering quickly. The question is, do you think it's worth querying a first novel, edited and revised, of course, good job, seeing as it's hard to get representation for your first ever book? Would it make sense to wait for your second or third novel to query? As I think we all demonstrate, we all queried our first novels, I believe.
I say query it. It's a learning experience.
Yeah, it's a learning experience. Yeah. And I got an agent for my first book. I didn't sell it, so I think that's also a lesson. Like, still be very circumspect and realistic about your first book. It is, but I think it's proof. It is possible to revise your book into shape to get an agent. But I also think Lainey mentioned this when she's talking about her querying experience. Also ask yourself if you want it to be your debut. Because I will say, if you determine that you don't, there's nothing wrong with not querying it. Yeah.
And that's when thinking about your own career and what you want out of your own career is really important. Because like, if you want to write mostly YA fantasy, then you shouldn't like query a middle grade contemporary as your debut, because if that sells and gets picked up, then that's what you're going to be writing for like at least the next 2 or 3 years or so.
Yeah.
You want that first middle grade contemporary and then something else along the same lines as that. Like they're not going to want you to jump into different genres right away.
Yep.
So you got to think about like what you want to be writing for your first few books before you even consider like what you want to do more broadly with your career.
We got a question in the live chat. When is the best time of year to query? Because I mentioned that I feel there are good and bad times. I'm just gonna tell you the times that you shouldn't query. And it's not that you can't, it's just less optimal. December. December for 2 reasons. 1, the holidays. 2, NaNoWriMo. Agents get so many queries for people who don't do their research, who aren't watching this lovely live chat and being smart about publishing, and they query their NaNoWriMo novel right after they finish it. And so their inbox
did NaNoWriMo novel.
So bad. So meaning in December, they're going to get a flood of bad books and bad queries. But here's the thing. Some people would also say, then you'll stand out if you have a good book. And I'll say, if your book is legitimately ready in December, you can query, but don't query on or around Christmas. Also, depending on the agent, pay attention to Jewish holidays, because like Hanukkah is a bad time to query most Jewish agents because they take the time. Honestly, I just wouldn't query in December. And then there's also pay attention to conference season. Don't query during BEA. Don't query during Bologna, which is a big subrights fair. If the agent is attending, again, research. And in the summer, you can query, but it is slower, especially if the agent is on vacation. So you can technically query anytime, but I'll tell you the best times to query. The best times really are the fall and the spring. And this mirrors submission times. These are the best times to submit books to publishers. So there's just something about the start of the school year, so September, October, and the start of the year, January, February, and March, where agents and editors are just energized for new books. So I mentioned I wanted to query. I queried in February. Yeah.
It's the after summer, like after everyone's on vacation for summer, and not to slow down, and their kids are back in school and stuff. They're ready to get back to work for the fall season. And after the new year, they just had their Christmas vacation. They're ready to get to work for the new year. So yeah, those are good times to query. But again, it also doesn't. It's not the biggest factor. Like you query, right? Don't hold on to your query for months. Like if you're ready in the summer, query during the summer. Don't like just sit on it for 4 months until it's October.
Oh, one more time, it's bad. I'm sorry. Right after Pitch Wars. The 2 weeks of and after the Pitch Wars showcase, do not query because
there's so much other stuff going on. Yeah.
Well, and they get so many offers and they have to read on tight deadlines. Pitch Wars completely throws a schedule off for an agent.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, for my first book, I did query in the summer. So, and it didn't work out in my favor, but I did get a lot of response within the first few weeks of sending them out. So,
here's a question that is kind of interesting. Does it hurt or help your agent finding querying when you mention having a self-published series?
Ooh.
So if you have self-published a book or a series before, I think in general, it doesn't affect it much either way, unless you have terrible, terrible sales and a terrible cover and like it just looks very unprofessional, or if you have very, very good sales and it looks very good. In general, like agents won't care a whole lot either way, unless you're like very bad or very good.
Well, that's the thing. It can actually hurt you because if you sold nothing, then it can hurt you, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because your sales aren't good enough to matter, but B, then they go, well, some self-published individuals, not all, encounter issues in traditional publishing, meaning an agent will go, this person's going to be difficult to work with. It does happen. So sometimes it's better never to mention that you ever self-published, especially if you didn't do well. If you have more than 6 figures of sales, so if you've sold more than 100,000 copies, then you can mention your self-published book, but you better be querying a new book. This is not querying your self-published book to get it traditionally published. That is not going to help you. So it really depends. But if you've built an amazing platform in self-publishing, put it in your query. Yeah.
I mean, the big thing is, though, if you've built an amazing platform self-publishing, agents are going to reach out to you.
Yeah. If you've really blown up, You don't need to query. It's kind of unfair in that respect. And then the people who blow up the most don't need traditional publishing.
Yeah, and it's another unicorn thing where there's like 5 authors that it has happened to or something like that.
Yeah, no, and we can probably name them all. Oh, here's a good one. This is a good basic thing to cover. Let's say you query one manuscript and you get no response, but then 2 years later you have a new manuscript. Can you query the same agents or agencies, or do you need to find a new place to query? Absolutely query the same places. So agents get so many queries and so many books, even the ones they read, they're not going to remember you. As long as you didn't leave a bad impression, it's a fresh slate every time. And if you did leave a good impression, if someone liked your full and gave you a nice rejection, a personal rejection, it's worth saying, you read my last book, blah, 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 and this is my new book. That can actually work in your favor. But as long as you don't leave a bad impression, it just query the same people.
Yeah, just follow the rules and you'll never leave like a bad taste in someone's mouth.
Yes. Oh, this is also a good one related to the previous question, the one before. Do you think you should even query when you are leaning towards self-publishing? And I say it does not hurt. You lose nothing if you query a book that you have been polishing to publish yourself, and you never know what's going to happen. I say if you're, because then you'll always wonder what if, so you might as well. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
I think it also depends a lot on why you're leaning towards self-publishing. Like, is it because you are going to be able to retain control and like do it all exactly how you want? Or is it because you're worried that you might not be able to get an agent? Because if you're just like thinking like, oh, maybe I can't get an agent, like I know it's hard, I don't want to put myself through that, it might be worth it to do it, because it's, again, a learning experience and you never know. And if you're staying away from traditional publishing because it's hard, I don't know, I personally see that as more of a challenge to accept rather than something that would scare me away.
Yeah.
We've got a good question in the chat. If an agent has a small list and is in an agency with a lot of YA sales, but that particular agent has very few YA sales, despite repping YA. So this is when you have to get a little crafty. The first question I have is, how long have they been repping YA? If it's been a very long time, yeah, that's weird. Possibly red flag. But if it's been less than 2 years, it's not. Because then again, you ask the question, who's mentoring them? And if they're at a great agency that has great YA sales, usually you're fine. But if it's been more than 3 years and they really don't have good sales or a lot of sales, like if someone has been agenting for 4 or 5 years, they should have more than 2 sales to the big 5 if they're going to be good and they're going to make it. Also throw this in as anecdata. This is just something that I have noticed coming up a lot. This is borderline off topic, but I've noticed this with AMM because mentees like run agents by me all the time. If you write Kidlit, if you write YA in middle grade, and an agency is really, really good at adult romance, that does not mean they can sell your YA or middle grade novel. I see far too many people go, well, they must be good because they sell to the big 5. I'm like, romance is different. Adult romance has nothing to do with YA or middle grade. So I know that's kind of a harken back to like, pay attention to categories and sales, but that's like an actual trend I've noticed where people, I've noticed a lot of agencies that are good at adult romance are trying to get into YA. Most of them are not doing it well. So don't throw away your career with those agents, please. Please.
Here's an interesting question. If you really, really want to write in 2 or more genres, how do you bring this up to an agent? Or is that something about you would even like want to bring up? Like, when do you do that?
That is a great question.
I'm curious about that because I don't know personally, but in my mind, I would think maybe during that initial call when you're deciding about representation, like you should at least vaguely mention like where you see your career going, like future, the next 5 years. So like, do you ever plan to write in more genres? You can let the agent know that, but like, I feel like in general, they're going to want you to stick to one kind of more narrow genre for at least the first 2 books, just because
usually,
if you don't do that, you're kind of a nightmare for your marketing team because they're like, how do we sell you? How do we brand you? We can't create a consistent brand. So yeah, but what are your guys' thoughts on this?
Well, you need to ask them because first of all, they're going to have to sell the book they sign you on first. You definitely they're not going to go and sub with 3 different books in 3 different genres. They're going to sell the first one first. I do know people who have done this successfully, by the way. What they started with YA and now they do YA adult and middle grade. You need to ask your agent, the agent on the offer call, say, let's say we sell this. I also have a middle grade ready to go. How do you feel about submitting a middle grade after selling the YA? Do you think I need a pen name? How would you approach selling? You could basically say, I am capable of writing and I want to sell 2 to 3 books a year. How would we approach that together? And some agents will give you a full-on stop sign. They'll be like, no. And others would be like, yes, I'm into this. Some agents really like synergizing
The strategy.
authors like that. Yes.
And stuff. Yeah.
And I do have a friend who, it's not the only reason, but they did leave an agent because that agent was not partnering with them properly as a business partner to sell in multiple genres, multiple books a year. And that's what the author was capable of and wanted. You do it to, like, you know, Victoria Schwab has Holly Root. Holly Root is good at this. Holly Root does this a lot. There are other agents who are also very good at it. So you should also look for agents who rep those kinds of clients when you're querying. And I will also say it's very rare to pull it off.
I see a question that says, for those of us that are YA fantasy sci-fi authors, would you share that list of 30 agents? And the thing is, I don't think any of our lists are the same 30 agents.
Yeah. They probably have some crossover, but
there's so much nuance and personalization. Like there is no list of like the top YA fantasy agents. Like it really is so personal, and you got to do the research yourself.
Yeah.
Because there could be an agent or an agency that has like 5 really great YA agents in that agency, but you can only query one of them. So they all could be great, but you do the research on what agent you think is going to fit your manuscript the best.
Yeah. So I bet there's some usual suspects on our list. I bet there are some people who are kind of no-brainers.
List a couple of the agencies that are like the bigger agencies for YA agents. So we have like
We probably all queried someone at Writer's House.
New Leaf, Writer's House, Andrea Brown.
Well, I mean, Holly Root is my one that got away. I know I've mentioned her multiple times. She was never open to queries when I queried all of my books, all of them.
Well, she used to be another agency before she made her own, right?
Waxman Label. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Lavelle. But I mean, just generally, she's one of the top YA science fiction and fantasy agents in the business right now. It's
years ago, and like things have changed since then. Like some of them started around, some of them have started their own agencies. Like when I queried, I don't remember if I queried Joanna Volpe or Susie Townsend or both.
They were both at different agencies. Yeah.
I think I queried both of them before New Leaf existed. So
yeah. So yeah, it's hard to say, but trust me, if you do your research, you will find the people we queried. You'll figure it out. Anything else? We can wrap up in just a few minutes.
I think we covered as much as we can in the time that we have.
Yeah.
Like a good overview. We can definitely do a part 2 later and get more in depth and more of like a 201 than a 101. But yeah, I think we covered most of it.
I do say there were a lot of questions throughout the chat about whether if you live in a different country, if you can query agents in the US, and like that, yes, you can do that.
Yeah. I'll say this is like good news and bad news. Yes, you can. I know multiple people who live outside the US and they're repped by US agents and they sell their books in the US as their primary market. Of course, all YA. Very often it won't be a deterrent for an agent to sign you, but sometimes publishers are less, they're more reluctant to buy books from people who it'll be harder for them to market them because they do live outside the US. Not impossible, just harder. Just harder. That's all. If you're living outside of the US English book market, it's possible, but harder. That's all.
It adds a little level of complexity because you have like different contracts, like it's
and the taxes are a nightmare.
Taxes are different, but it's not a big deterrent.
It is 100% possible. I have friends who live in South Africa who've sold books, the UK, of course, Hong Kong, Australia.
There's Canadian authors
tons of
Australian authors. Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman are huge, and they're both Australian.
Mm-hmm.
So it definitely depends on the market, but yeah, it's definitely possible.
What about U.S. writers querying agents that are based in the U.K.?
Oh, that's a good question. I have feelings about it. If you primarily want to be published in the US, your first book, like your primary book deal, essentially, and then everything else becomes foreign sales subrights. A lot of the time, UK agents, it's such a different industry. The UK book world works so differently from the US one that very often you're not going to get the results you want. I have found. This is nothing against UK agents. My co-agent is great. But she sold me as a foreign deal. I know some individuals who did sign with UK agents and they were unable to sell their books in the US market, even though the person was American.
And I feel like UK agents might be more wary about taking on an international client.
Yes. Yeah. But if you want your initial deal to be in the UK, you should look for a UK agent because it's such a specific market and UK agents understand it. I mean, most US agents use sub-agents, co-agents in the UK to sell books in the UK because it's such a finicky, specific book market. So especially if you are British and you want to be like first published in the UK, it behooves you to get a UK agent. And I should say UK agencies should often have co-agents in the US, just like US agents have co-agents in the UK. So it just kind of depends. All right. I think we can probably wrap up. I feel like we've covered a lot, right?
Yeah. Almost been 2 hours. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. We did so good though. It's my fault. This should have just been a single topic. I'm a horrible person. So thank you everyone for watching. Once we kind of close the video and close the live chat, feel free to let us know down in the comments additional questions you have, especially anything that is going to help us roll things up into another episode. I don't think we've picked our next episode. We haven't picked the ideas. So maybe it'll come from this.
Let's see. When are we meeting again? So not the first Sunday of January, not next Sunday, but January 13th. We will be on Lainey's channel.
Yes, talking about something.
We'll announce that on our Twitter sometime in the next 2 weeks. So just follow us there.
Well, and generally, we're open to topic suggestions, clearly. Yeah. So if there are burning topics you'd love for us to cover on Noveltea Show, let us know down below in the comments when this is done. So thank you. Sorry?
Or tweet us.
Yeah, I always
tweet us
too. And if you want to catch up on past Noveltea Show episodes, we have a playlist, which you will find in the description box of this video. We'll add this to that playlist shortly. You can catch up. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Kat. Thank you, Lainey. I think we had a good time. Yeah. See you next time, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.